fórum við síðast í frí? Það eru 3 ár. Ha?
Þú veist að missa manniðinn. Við hjá kaupfélaginu, við stöndum hér.
Mér líður eins og hann hafi svikið mig. Skilið mig eftir í einhverju skuldasúpu með kaupfélagið andandi ofan í hálsmál á mér. Ég skrifaði grein daginn spillinguna innan kaupfélagsins.
Einhverjir sem vilja... Mér langar að ræða þessum girðingar.
Þetta samfélag sjúkt.
Það búið að loka reikningum.
Rugglegt. Þetta mafía.
Við ættum að leyfa þér að fara á hausinn.
Ef þú ætlar að búa hérna áfram, þá skal þú fara að hugsa þinn gangvíkuna.
Kæru félagar.
Við bændur tökum aftur völdin í okkar hendur.
Hún er snarvitlaus. Er þetta eitthvað grín? Nei, þetta ekki. Þú voru verið að grínast mikið undanfarið.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of The Living Room brought to you by Curzon Home Cinema. If you're watching this live, you can join the conversation via YouTube, Facebook or Twitter. Just use the hashtag Curzon Living Room. Send us your question and also let us know where in the country or indeed where in the world you're writing from. I'm delighted to be joined today by the director of the county, Grímur Hákonarson. Grímur, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good.
Considering the epic scope of the film's visuals, I'm very impressed with the landscape shot that we've got you in today.
Yeah. Yeah, this is my wife did this setup, you know. I don't know anything about computers and techniques, you know. That's not my field, you know. So she did this. Well, I suggested this chair, you know. I thought like a director, he needed like a big chair to sit in, you know. And
yeah, it gives you a sense of authority. Clearly, I'm kind of getting that vibe as I'm looking at you now.
Yeah, I look like established, you know.
So let's just actually just so people know where you are you based in Reykjavik?
Yes, I'm in my house in Reykjavik. I live in the center, downtown of Reykjavik.
And what's life been like there over the course of the last 2 months?
Well, we've been having like a lockdown, but luckily the virus is gone here. So we'll be opening up the borders like in 2 weeks here, and life is back in the usual, as usual, you know. Things are becoming usual again.
So let's talk about the county. It's your third film. A lot of people will know you from your previous film Rams, which was a great success at the Cannes Film Festival and then did really, really well internationally. Was the success of that film, did that give you the freedom to be able to pick whatever topic you wanted, and why pick this topic?
Yes, I think so, you know, and maybe a freedom to do like a political film. There haven't been made so many political films in Iceland, and you know, the county is a very political film here, and maybe I felt I maybe had the leverage to do such a film, you know, after Rams. So yeah, you could say that. You know.
And in terms of the story itself, was it inspired by your actual writing of it? Was the spark of inspiration based on an actual event, or just a general feeling about cooperatives and farming cooperatives in Iceland?
Yeah, the idea comes from a real cooperative. It's based on true stories from an area called Skagafjörður, the northwest of Iceland, and there is like a big like a cooperative company that controls like this area, and I wanted to make a documentary in the beginning, and I went there, I talked to some people, and I felt like that they were too scared to be on camera, to participate in the documentary, and so that's why I decided to make a fiction film. So yeah, it's based on true stories, and it's based on. I also have this background in the countryside, like from my family, and so I'm familiar with the life there and characters and the surroundings and the landscape and all that.
Yeah, I'd read that your grandparents were farmers and you used to spend summers working with them. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I use actually. I mean, my grandfather was he was a little bit similar, like a character from Rams, and so yeah, I'm sometimes called like the rural Ken Loach of Iceland,
Okay, let's before I move on to the actual story itself and the main characters in the story, if we could stay a little bit with the idea of these co-ops. One of the pleasures I always have with interviewing directors is that I get to go off and do research about subjects that I think I would never ever look into, and farming cooperatives in Iceland is definitely quite close to the top of the list of them. I was quite amazed to find out that this is not something relatively new that may have come around in liberalization in the 1960s. This is something that actually dates back to the 19th century, isn't it?
Yeah. It's we used to have like a cooperative movement here. Started like in the end of the 19th century, and it started very small. It was just founded like in the north of Iceland by a few farmers, and then it grew very big, and it became like a state in the state. It became like a very powerful movement. But it went bankrupt in the end of the 90s. But it only survived in Skagafjörður, in this area where the film is set, and so it's only there, It's not like operating all over the country. It's only in this place, and sometimes people joke about it, and they say that it's like the Icelandic Sicily, yeah.
An interesting comparison. There have been a lot of films over the years, going back to even the 19th century in America, with smaller farms being bought up by larger and larger farms till they form corporations. And I was really surprised, Skagafjörður, the area you're talking about in the cooperative, in the 1970s, there were around 2,500 farms. And a couple of years ago, they were less than 600. And yet they were producing more milk. And it does feel like this sense that there's, from what I've read, this larger organization overseeing everything. And if not setting the prices, then certainly making it quite difficult for anyone else to compete against them.
Yes, I mean, in Skagafjörður, they control they own most of the enterprises there. They even control the local government, and you can't do business with anyone else than the co-op. And but the majority of the people there, they support the system, the co-op. And of course it has some advantages, it's not only like a bad thing, like in the Soviet Union, that the system in the Soviet Union at least created some kind of security for people, and I think that the people in Skagafjörður, they kind of, there's security there, if something goes wrong, the co-op kind of can help, and save people, and but the cost is that you are sort of dependent on them, you're not free, and so there is a pros and cons with the system, and like global capitalism, that's that's not like the solution, you know. I mean, that's even worse than the cope system. But in my film, I depict this vision of like a grassroots kind of. They try to create like a new thing, you know, like a new enterprise. A new cooperative, you know. So that's kind of the solution. And this is like my idea of the solution of the problem.
And at the heart of this, you've got Inga and Rainier, the two main characters, the couple. Could you talk a little bit about the creation of those characters? Were they based on a collection of people that you encountered or knew earlier in your life?
Yes, they're based on like many different people. I mean, you could say that Rainier is based on some guys from my family, you know. This kind of very like a stubborn kind of a bit like a workaholic that you know, works 24/7 and supports the co-op and doesn't really, you know, a bit narrow-minded kind of character. And then Inga is based on a real woman I know that is running her own farm, and it's interesting what is happening now in Icelandic countryside is that women are becoming more visible. You know, they're running their own farms, and the characters and the character of Inga is inspired by that these changes that are happening now.
And with Inga in mind, could you talk about developing that character with your actor, artist Hrón Egilsdóttir? Correct me if my pronunciation's wrong.
Artist Hrón Egilsdóttir. Yeah, she had no experience in farming. You know, she's like a bohemian. You know, like an artist. She's been living in Reykjavik all her life, and so I thought it was important that she would get a sense of farming, and so we decided that she would go to stay at the farms and get to know the life and the animals, and so we did a lot of this practical preparations with her. She's a great actress, you know, and I knew that she could, you know, act, you know, and she's especially very strong, like in these emotional moments, you know. But she had to be believable as a farmer, and you know, when you make a movie, you want the audience to sort of you don't want them to see that, oh, this is an actress from Reykjavik trying to show shit, you know. You want them to believe it's a real person.
I've got a question here from Brenda from Wigan. Did you want a more upbeat story after Rams? Perhaps to develop this, how does the county relate to Rams? If it does at all.
Yeah, but I would say that because the county is like a story of like a female hero, you know, like a woman kind of rising up against this it's like a David and Goliath sort of story, you know, and I believe the basic idea of the county sort of has a little bit sort of upbeat feel to it, you know. You know, ideas have a certain nature, and Rams, the idea behind Rams is very different in essence than the idea of the county. You know, the idea of the county is
I think what I really like about the county, and if anyone is watching this and has yet to watch the film, you might want to just switch off for a couple of seconds. The fact that, yes, we do have an element of her winning, but also ultimately, personally, in one way, she's lost at the end of the film because she loses the farm. But what I found really interesting with it is that it works away from the Hollywood happy ending, which would have been she keeps the farm, she probably has even more land. You keep it grounded in a reality.
Yeah. I mean, that's important for me. You know, you're right about that. You know, that the Hollywood ending would be that she would, you know, she would win the co-op and she would stay there. But yeah, I mean, she wins and loses. You know, it's like a bittersweet ending. And I think in reality, you know, they would never. The co-op would always win. You know, so at least in the movie, you know, she wins at this one moment. You know, she wins. She is at this final meeting with all the community, and she kind of wins the co-op like in the vote, you know, and so. But the most important is that she reconciles. You know, she reconciles with her past and with her husband and with the co-op. So she's ready to move on. She has because a part of the film is also the spiritual journey of Inga. You know. Yes.
Again, what's really great with the character, like the story, is that she's grounded in reality. And I think one of the reasons that I was so transported by the film is her sense of humor that remains throughout. That's really important and intrinsic to her character.
Yeah. I think the humor comes sort of rapidly. So like this, maybe the beginning of the movie is more serious, and the humor comes sort of as the film goes along, you know, and it is a bit difficult, like when you have like a suicide, like someone losing her husband, someone who kills himself. It's a bit difficult to make that funny, you know. But yeah, I think that the humor sort of kicks in a little bit, like as the film develops.
On the subject of that, I've got a question from Owen in Wales, who asks, did the milk scene actually happen, or was that something that you created for the story?
Yeah, it happened here, like in the 70s in Iceland, that there was a man, he was protesting against the church, and we have this thing in Iceland called skyr. It's similar like yogurt, and he threw it on the government when the government was walking from the cathedral in the center of Reykjavik and into the parliament. He came running and he threw this skyr on the politicians. So it's maybe inspired by that event. It is also inspired by French farmers who have been were famous for using shit sprinklers.
Yep.
Shit sprinklers.
Manure, yeah.
But I don't know if they have ever used milk, you know. But we decided to fill the machine with milk instead of using shit, you know. I thought the metaphor of that was somehow stronger, you know, like because she's a woman, you know, and the milk, it's like an attack on the patriarchy, you know.
And it's also easier for your crew to clear up afterwards.
Yeah, but it was like you know, we made it in the post production, like we had a little bit of milk in the tank, you know. But it was like mixed with water, you know, so it was pretty thin, you know. So we had to paint, like in the post-production, you know, make it a bit thicker and creamy, you know. So yeah, it was, but it was like a very, it was a fun scene to shoot, you know.
I've got a couple more questions from audience members. This is from Aurélie in France, and she says she's writing from the French countryside. She has previously helped a cow give birth to a calf, which isn't always easy. Did you achieve that opening scene on the first take?
No, we did 2 takes. So we shot two calves, you know. We didn't shoot them. I mean, we filmed two calves, and the first time we did it, the actress was not like very convincing, and the light was not so good there, and but we also did like once like a preparation with the actress without before we film, you know, like in the preparation, like in a we rehearsed it once with her also. So, but in the second time, yeah, we succeeded to make it work. But this scene was like filmed like a documentary. We had crew, and it is like a situation. It's difficult to control the situation, you know. It's something that just happens, you know, and you know, we didn't have any storyboard or anything. We just needed to film, you know.
You mentioned documentary again. I've looked at the films that you've made, and you seem to go between making fiction and documentary films. Do you find that balance sort of helps you as a filmmaker, both as a documentarian and as a feature filmmaker?
Yeah, I think you can sort of see it like in the country and the Rams that I have like a documentary background. You know, I think I get inspired from making documentaries. I get sort of inspired to make the fictions, and vice versa. You know, I think you know, I think my fiction films are very kind of down to earth, and like they have this documentary feel, and also like the cinematography has this documentary feel to it.
And this is regarding another sequence in the film. This is a question from Claude in London. And he's talking about the scene where the vote is about to be taken quite late in the film. Did you always intend to focus solely on Inga with that close-up when the vote is taken, so that we don't actually see the result of it? We only hear it.
Yeah. That was the idea. Yeah, all the time. We would. Yeah, we would be close on her, and you know, inside her head, you know. Yeah.
But this is something that, having watched Rams as well as this film, that fascinates me about your filmmaking. I sometimes think you might have written a line, but you realize that you can leave it to the camera just lingering on the actor's face and just see their expression rather than hear them say something or see an action by them. It speaks more than words.
Yeah, I think that's well, that's actually something I kind of learned when I was studying in Prague in the film school there, you know, FAMU. That there was a teacher that I looked up to, and he taught us, and this is like maybe a part of the Czech sort of filmmaking. That if you can cut dialogue and tell the same thing with using the camera or using some visuals, you should always like go for that, you know. And so this is something I always try to do, you know, that if I can, you know, take out dialogues from the script, you know, and I do that, you know.
Another person like Aris who has an incredibly expressive face is Sigurður Johnson, who people will have seen from Rams. Here, he plays the villain of the piece. Did you always have that role in mind for him, because he's fantastic in it?
Yeah, actually, when we had the rap party in Rams, you know, when he finished shooting Rams, I actually proposed this role to him, you know. Yeah. So yeah, I hired him, you know, just when we were shooting Rams.
I want to talk about the visuals again, but this time the exteriors in the film. The location that you shoot in, I have this idea, having seen a number of Icelandic films now, I kind of feel like Iceland is sort of a more austere version of Italy, in that it's almost impossible to shoot an ugly place in the Icelandic countryside. It all looks so ravishingly beautiful, if somewhat sparse. Was it easy to find the perfect location for this film?
Yeah, when I was looking for the location, I was mostly thinking about the type of farm, you know, the robotic, like a farm with like a robotic milking system, and but of course, like it also helps that to have mountains around it and like the nature, but my focus was more on the size of the farms and the look of the barn and all that, you know. You know, yeah, Icelandic landscape is you know, pretty, you know, beautiful, you know. And this is just something you get when you film here, you know. I think most Icelandic filmmakers, they're not really thinking so much about the landscape. It's just there, you know. We just try to tell stories of people, maybe, and if they live in the countryside, they're always surrounded by mountains, and so that's just an extra like an eye candy, or you could say that, you know.
And you worked this time with the Estonian cinematographer, Mart Daniel, which some people might be familiar with from a film that was released a couple of years ago, November, which he also shot, and I think it was The Temptation of St. Tony as well. How did you decide to work with him?
Yeah, we went to the same film school in Prague, you know.
Right.
We went there, and he shot my graduate film. And yeah, so I got to know him there, and we always wanted to work together again, and now we in the country we decided to do that.
I've got a couple of more questions from the audience. This is from Catherine Simmons. Iceland seems to inspire strong female farmers. She loved the autobiography Haida and wondered if that book in any way inspired this film.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I read that book, and Artís, the actress, she met Heiða when she was preparing for the role. She stayed with her for a week.
I have another question from Rob in London. He just watched the film, loved it, and I wish I'd seen it in the cinema, not just because of the visuals, but Valgeir Sigurdsson's music. Sometimes it's low in the mix, more ambient, and other times it carries the action and the emotions. Can you talk about your collaboration with him on the music, with the visuals?
Yeah, me and Valgeir, we kind of we found out very early that we wanted the music to be a bit like inspired by this robotic milking system, you know, and the sounds in the barn, you know. So the music is actually based on the sounds that we recorded at the location, and yeah, and we didn't use much like a violins or classical. The music is not very classical. It's more like electronic. So yeah, that was the idea of the music, and the barn is like part of Inga's routine and Inga's world, and when she goes fighting the co-op, she kind of takes she takes the robot sounds with her on the yeah.
I've got a question from Pete Curzon about the reaction to the film, and I just want to add into that I read that MS Iceland dairies between 2014 and 16 were being investigated. They were found guilty of violation of the Competition Act, appealed, and then when the appeal result came back, it was even more egregious what it seemed that they'd done. With that in mind, Pete Curzon asks what the impact of this film has been and how the dairy co-op has reacted to it.
Yeah, they haven't reacted at all, you know. They haven't expressed they haven't expressed themselves about the film at all. And when the film was released in Iceland, there was a lot of discussion, like in Skagafjörður, among the people, like people writing on Facebook and some newspaper articles, and most of the people they were saying that the film depicts the reality, and it shows the life as it is, and they were criticizing the co-op, and some of them were asking for some changes, but then it just died out, and nothing really happened. And yeah, there has been no response from the co-op at all, but this is a little bit like the tactic they use usually, that they don't speak to the media, they are a little bit like a hidden people, I think the director of the co-op in Skagafjörður, he has never been on TV, has never been on TV. You can't, it's really difficult to find a picture of him,
And there's no sort of political reaction to that. There's no sense that this is wrong, people should be accountable and should appear in public. Or would you say that the politics and business is very closely combined on this?
Yeah, they have a lot of power, like in there is a political party here in Iceland called the Central Party, which is like it's some kind of farmers party, and it's very closely connected to the cooperative movement, and that's the history of that, and the co-op in Skagafjörður, they kind of have a grip, they kind of control that party, and they have a lot of influence, but I think they probably thought that if they would come out and start to talk about the film, then the film would just get more attention, and so I think their policy is just to shut up, and don't say anything.
Yeah, that's not a policy that seems to be happening with certain people in this country at the moment. But I've got a final question here from Adam Morling, who asks about the general landscape of film and culture in Iceland, which seems to, from our perspective, there've been quite a lot of Icelandic films opening and a lot of Icelandic music traveling around the world. And he asked, what's causing this? Is it just a generational thing that suddenly there's this appearance of a whole group of really incredibly talented creatives?
Yes, I would say that we have a strong art scene in Iceland. We have this a strong literature culture. They like the sagas, were written here, but I would say like the reason why the Icelandic films are so successful abroad is probably because we're just telling our own stories, and we are not pretentious, we're not pretending to be something else than we are, we're just telling stories of this normal Icelandic people, and we are not trying to do some big mainstream films, like a commercial films, we're just doing the small independent movies, and so I think that's the main reason. But I mean, there's also like a new generation of filmmakers coming up now, and many new directors, and I guess it's probably like the Icelandic football team, which is have been really strong in the last years. It's a generation, and maybe it's it's a generation that is now, and maybe the next generation maybe is not gonna do the same. I don't know.
Well, congratulations on your new film, and we look forward to seeing your next film whenever it comes out. I've heard a rumor that you might be filming in America with your new film. Is that true?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'm making a film in the US. That's an urban. It's an urban story. But I'm also working on an Icelandic script, like a period movie. You know, I don't like modernity. You know, I like the past. You know, and I like, yeah.
Well, great. Thank you very much for joining us today, Grímur.
Yeah, thank you.
With regards to upcoming living room events brought to you by Curzon Home Cinema, on this Wednesday, the 27th of May at 8:30, there will be an interview with Harry Woodliff, the director of Only You. She will be in conversation with Mia Bays, who is from Bird's Eye View and Reclaim the Frame. And then a week today, on Monday, the 1st of June, again at 8:30, I will be in conversation with the director of Only the Animals, Dominic Moll, and one of its lead actors, Denis Menachet. And don't forget, at the moment, until a week Friday, you can see the films that make up this year's Human Rights Watch Film Festival on Curzon Home Cinema. If you go on there, you'll get details of all the interviews with the directors of those films that are taking place. Some have already happened, and you'll be able to watch those on Facebook, but you will be able to catch up with some live events coming up over the course of the next week and a half. Thank you for joining me, and take care of yourselves. Bye.